Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Yes, we're back. It's 10 o'clock in the Pacific Northwest, and we are going to be doing a webinar. Today, we're going to be covering Voice of the Customer versus Forms Pro, and I have Megan Walker. She's down in Australia, and she's
in England.
England, sorry. Coffee hasn't kicked in yet, sorry. England. And she is going to be covering all of the fun stuff that you get out of Forms Pro and why you should move away from Voice of the Customer. Megan?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pervin. Yes, so I am from England, and it's about 6 p.m. here on Monday. So thank you for joining and watching and spending your time during this webinar. So hopefully wherever you are, you're happy, safe, and healthy during this time. So let's go ahead and we'll get started. So first of all, let's do a bit of an introduction. So who am I? So my name is Megan Walker, and I am a Microsoft Business Applications MVP, and I'm also an independent consultant. So I've got over 10 years experience in the Power Platform. So before that even existed, so with Microsoft Dynamics when it was CRM, and then all the way through different versions to Dynamics 365 Online. So a lot of the stuff that I do is a focus on sort of marketing, the marketing platform, Forms Pro, obviously, that's why I'm here. The portals from when they were ADX Studio all the way through up to Power Apps portals, writing reports, and then also sales and the customer service apps. So quite a wide range of things that I enjoy doing and that I have experience in. So if you have been looking into Forms Pro, no doubt if you've Googled stuff, you've probably come across some of my articles. I've got over 60 at the minute that are all about Forms Pro. If not, and you want to kind of have a look at some more content after this webinar, then I've got some links up there with my website. If you're on Twitter, LinkedIn, you can go ahead and connect. And then also I have a YouTube channel, and there are a ton of videos on there as well. So for each blog post, we've got a video that goes along with it. Okay, so that's a little bit about who I am. So let's go ahead and get into the content, and let's start looking at Voice of the Customer and Forms Pro and the sort of transition to get from one to the other. So let's go ahead and look at a bit of a timeline. So Voice of the Customer was launched in February 2016. I actually used this myself as an end user for a while. I've implemented it quite a few times. So that was launched. And then in March of last year, 2019, Forms Pro was released in public preview. So when that came out, that was something that I was working on a project, and Voice of the Customer was what we were going to start using. I heard about Forms Pro, so started looking into it right after it came out in public preview. In July of last year is when Forms Pro was made GA, or generally available. So that's why people could actually start using it and using it in a live production environment. And at the same time, Microsoft also announced the deprecation of Voice of the Customer. Deprecation meaning you could use it for a while, but essentially it was going away. And in that announcement, and also it's been brought up many different times, I've written about it as well, the Voice of the Customer services stop in July of this year. So you don't have long, you've got May, June, and then 1st of July, that's it. So you've essentially got 2.5 months, and that's when Voice of the Customer can no longer be used. So let's go ahead and have a look at what happens on the 1st of July. So on the 1st of July, we talk about the Voice of the Customer service will stop running. So what does that actually mean? It means that no new services can be published. Sorry, no new surveys can be published. Any existing surveys that you've got, they're going to stop receiving responses. So if you're at the point now where you're continually sending out requests for surveys to be completed and you're asking for feedback, there's going to come a point where you may send out these emails to your customers and they may wait a while, and then it may have passed over July 1st and you won't get any of those responses. They won't be able to use those surveys. So no new survey invites can be sent either. And then any existing survey response data, that you're still going to be able to retain. You'll still have access to all of that. So if you've been using it, Since 2016, any of those responses, you will not lose that data, you will still have it, you just won't be able to carry on using Voice of the Customer. So it really is time to move, and it's time to do that before July 1st. So let's go ahead and have a look at how is Forms Pro linked to Dynamics 365. So what we have, and we can see there, the CDS is known as the Common Data Service. That is what your Dynamics 365 environment sits on. What also sits there is Power BI, Power Automate, and Power Apps. So all of that sits on the Common Data Service. Forms Pro also is on the Common Data Service. What that means is when you're creating your surveys and you're sending out your survey invitations and you're getting those survey responses back in, all of that data is stored in the Common Data Service, which means you're going to be able to set up amazing, actionable surveys where you're asking for data and then you're getting the responses, and you can really then use those responses to run different workflows, to use Power Automate, to do things that you're not currently able to do with the Voice of the Customer data, for example. So you'll also then be able to use information within Power Apps. Forms Pro also exists in different places where you're going to be able to really sort of harness the responses and harness the power of that. So Common Data Service, if you haven't heard of it before, just know that that is what your Dynamics environment is sitting on, is running on. So all of this information is going to then be tied together. All right, so let's go ahead and have a look at what we're actually going to be focusing on in our demo today. So we're going to review the following areas. We're going to look at survey creation. So how do we actually create our new surveys in Forms Pro? Then we'll look at survey customization. How can we actually customize in terms of the theme, in terms of the branding, in terms of then sending out our requests for feedback? How does the survey distribution work? So what are the different ways and the different mechanisms we can use to go ahead and distribute our surveys? What happens with the survey responses? How do they come in? How can we access them? What do they look like? And then finally, we'll look at survey analytics. So what sort of reporting is available and how can we actually analyze the feedback that we're getting? So one thing to keep in mind as we go through the demo, you're no doubt here because you're currently using Voice of the Customer. So this is by no means going to be a Voice of the Customer demo. I'm going to show Voice of the Customer, but only in the sense of a comparison. So don't think that we're going to be looking at Voice of Customer in any great detail. What we are going to be doing is looking at Forms Pro and how you can create things and set things up in Forms Pro. Another thing to keep in mind, there is so much in terms of the functionality and the capabilities of Forms Pro. We just don't have time to fit all of this in within this webinar window timeframe. So there's a ton of extra functionality that we won't be able to touch on. But again, if you were to go to my website, look at blogs or look at the Microsoft documentation, you'll be able to find out more information there. One last thing before we jump into the demo. You should have access to a question panel where you can go ahead and submit questions. So feel free to go ahead and submit those along the way as we're going through this. There are other people moderating. We'll be able to look at those questions and either provide an answer then and there, or we can go ahead and we'll touch on those during the session. We'll take a few breaks and see if we've got any questions that we need to respond to. All right, so let's go ahead and let's get to the demo. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to look at a Voice of the Customer survey. So again, this should be stuff that you're familiar with if you've been using Voice of the Customer and you've been able to set up those surveys currently in your environment. So if we go to the tab here we've got a case closure survey. So that's the example that we're going to focus on. It's probably one of the most common examples is I've got a support case or a support ticket. The support case has been resolved. Upon resolution of that survey, we want that to go ahead and send out an email to the customer and say, hey, how did we do? Tell us how we did. Tell us how the support rep was. Were they friendly? Were they professional? Did we meet our SLAs? That kind of thing. So here's our Voice of the Customer survey, and we can see we've customized it slightly and we've got all of our questions on there. So let's go ahead and let's have a look in Forms Pro. And we're in Forms Pro now, and here we've got our case closure survey. So if I go ahead and let's get into that, And what I can do is I can just go ahead and preview it. So we're looking at essentially like for like. And in this, I've put a bit of a theme on there. And then we've got all of our questions. We've got the exact same questions as we have on our Voice of the Customer survey. I can preview and see what it will look like on a computer like what I'm on at the moment. And then I can also switch and see what it's going to look like on a mobile device as well. So it's already optimized and we can have a look through. So we know what the experience is going to be for the end user. All right, so you know, hopefully, again, that's why you're on this webinar, you know how to create a survey in Voice of the Customer, but how do we create one in Forms Pro? So let's go ahead and we're on our dashboard area for Forms Pro, and I've got the option for a new Pro survey. So let's go ahead and create a new one. So I'm going to create one for an event feedback survey. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in event feedback survey. So I'm able to just fill out some fields very quickly, very easily. We can see, please let us know what you thought of the recent event you attended. And then I can go ahead and I can add questions. If I click add new, one of the awesome things that I really love about Forms Pro is it's smart, it's intelligent. So based on the fact that I have given this the title of event feedback survey, it has provided some suggested questions. And some of these are recommended based on another previous survey that I've created. So we can see here that we've got all of these different questions that it's suggesting, and I can scroll through and have a look and see any of these questions that I actually want to use. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select and say, all right, I want to have these questions. And let's pick a couple more. And once I've selected them, we can see we've got 10 different ones selected, and I'm going to go ahead and add these. All right, so now we can see, based on the ones that I've selected, it's added all of these questions. Now, if I want to add in another one, I can go ahead and just click add new, and then I have the ability to select, well, what type of question is it that I want to add? Do I want to add a choice question? So that would be similar to your option set in Dynamics 365. Do I want it to be text? Do I want it to be a rating? Should it be a date, a ranking field, a like it, which is kind of like your matrix, or is it a net promoter score? So what is it that I actually want to add? So let's go ahead, and we don't have a rating question. I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to say, overall, what did you think? And then I've got the ability to say, okay, well, I want to have 10 stars, or I want it to be numeric. So I want them to pick from a number. And what we've also got is the ability to have that smiley. So the really, really sad, the dissatisfied, neutral, satisfied, and highly satisfied. So we can go ahead and add those different questions in. What we can also do is we've got a question here where we're asking for the email address. So I can go ahead and put some validation on this. So I can go ahead and I can click on the ellipsis here, the 3 dots, and I can set a restriction. So the restrictions allow me to say this has to be a number that someone submits, or it could be a custom validation. So basically using a regular expression, we can use that. What I want to do is I want to set this as a restriction, and if I'm asking for email address, I want to make sure that it meets the requirements for an email address. So it's got an @ symbol and it has a dot for .com or .co.uk or whatever that might be. What I can also do is I can set certain fields to be required. So I have my net promoter score here. I want to make this required. I can also set if I want a specific question to be used to monitor and track the sentiment of the responder. So the sentiment might be either really negative, so the event was terrible, the organizers were awful, the presenters were really bad, so those are all negative things. It could be something that's neutral, so neutral is kind of neither positive nor negative. The carpet was green. that's a non-emotional statement to make. Or it could be the event was amazing, it was fantastic, everyone was wonderful, the food was delicious. So those are all positive sentiment statements. So we can use that to say, should we measure the sentiment on this specific question? We can see here that this has been set to a long answer. So on a text question, it's either a single line text field or multi-line text field. And we also have the ability to add in subtitles. So I can say, let us know your thoughts so we can improve. I can add in additional sections into my questions. We can also then move things up and down. So I might want to put the Net Promoter Score last, so I can put use the arrows and I can move these questions around. So I'm going to put that one all the way at the bottom now. What I can also do is if I come up here at the top on this ellipsis, the 3 dots, I can go to the settings for this specific survey. So what I can do is I can change and I can say, right, well, this is about an event. So I can say, when do I want this survey to stop? So I can put an end date on this survey and I can say, okay, well, this survey should go through until the end of April. So let's give them the next few weeks to be able to respond. I can also say they've got a specific number of days. So if I didn't put an end date, but I wanted to give them 14 days, I could do that instead. I could also set a maximum number of responses. So in this, I probably wouldn't want to, but let's say you were using this to fill out and get feedback and you were going to give some kind of giveaway or prize to people for filling out the survey. So you might say for the first 50 people or 100 people. So we could set a maximum number of responses that are allowed. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward in terms of adding in and actually creating our survey. So we can see there that it's very easy to add those questions in. We get the suggestions for our questions. We can move the questions around. We can pick different types of questions. What we can also do is we can add in new sections to this. So I have these first few questions. I've got what's your full name, email address. Let's move this one down a little bit. Let's move this one to the end. What I can do is I can go ahead and I can add in a new section. So if I put that section there, and then if I preview this, we actually get a couple of pages. So we want to know the name and the email address. Do you have time to give us more feedback? And then we can go on to the next page. All right, so let's go ahead and just see, do we have any questions at the moment, Pervin, that we need to address? Or are we okay for now?
I think we are okay, Megan.
We're okay, perfect. All right, no
Okay.
problem. So now let's,
Sorry,
perfect.
took a while to unmute.
That's okay. It's a challenge on a Monday morning. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the survey customization. So showing your survey in a different light in terms of the theme, the color scheme, logos, that kind of thing. So let's go ahead and look at our surveys again. So the first one we can see there's our voice of the customer survey. We have the color scheme on the top. We've got a logo here. We can also change the way in which we want different colors to show. So the color at the bottom here, that kind of thing. So we know that we can customize this survey in different ways. So let's go ahead and look at the Forms Pro survey. So if I go back to my original one and we go to the case closure survey and we look at it, so we can see here that we have the same sort of purple color. We have a logo at the top here, and then we have a background image as well. So we can set that color scheme, a logo in the background. So let's go to our new event feedback survey and let's look at how we can do that. So if we click here, we can see that we've got the option to add a theme. Now we've got themes that are standard themes that have been delivered with Forms Pro. So if I click on one of these themes, here we can see there's a nice little theme. We've got a nice background there. And we didn't have to do anything. We've also got a color that's used at the top. I can pick another one. Now we can see it's changed to green with a nice little science type background there. So you might want to use one of those default themes. What we can also do is we can create our own theme and customize it. So I can set and customize the color. So I'm going to use a specific hex number. So let's go ahead and we'll type that in. So there's the color that I want to use, and notice that it has given the background a slight variation, or a sort of a lighter version of the color, and then the main color it's put as the header background. So then what I can do is I can go ahead and I can add in an image. So I could do an image search using Bing, and I could type in event, and I can see different images. We can see there that these are images that have been tagged with the Creative Commons license, so it typically means that you're able to use that. I could search for an image on OneDrive, or I can go ahead and I can search and I could find an image from where I've downloaded it, or where I've got it in my one of my C drives or something like that. So I can go ahead and I can actually upload an image to be used instead as well. Now what I can also do, let's try that again. Okay, hopefully that will show up in a minute. Now I can do a couple of other things. What I can also do is I can change the font that is used. So we can see here that when we click on the survey title, it's opened up now a little sort of editing tool, and I can change the font that's used. So let's go ahead and we can pick this one, and let's go ahead and change the font size. We'll make it a little bit bigger. Let's go with this one. So we can then see that we can change things very easily. It will save immediately. As soon as you make that change, then that will save for us, so we can see those differences immediately. We can do the same thing on the descriptions, and we can do the same thing also on the questions as well, and the subtitles of the questions too. Now, another thing that we can do is we can use variables. Now, variables are pretty much the same as what we've got here, where we've got our piped data. So again, if you used Voice of the Customer and you had created your surveys, chances are you were probably using those piped variables, those piped values, where in place of hi customer pipe data, we could actually determine what value we wanted to use in place of that specific pipe data. So we have the same concept within Forms Pro. Now, what we can do in Forms Pro is we can go ahead and we can set up some variables for this specific survey. So if I come up here to the ellipsis, I have something called survey variables. We can see here by default what we've got is there's 3 different variables that will show up. We have first name and last name. They're pretty obvious. We know what they are. The locale variable is there for us to use if we want to send different language surveys. So we've got the ability to set up multilingual surveys. So what we can do is we can set up a process and determine the correct version of the survey to go out to the correct customer. Also by default, if you've set up different surveys, so let's say we have an English version, maybe a French and a German, based on the browser language setting of the recipient of the email, when they open up the survey, they will have the correct language displayed for them. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we'll add another variable. So we will call this event session, and we can add in up to 15 variables on this. So when I add a variable, it will be provided immediately for us. So what we can then do, let's see, let's add in another question. Let's do a text question. So what we can do is we can put in the question title, and then we can go ahead and we can select our different variables, and we can just pull that in. And we'll look at in a moment how we're able to use the variables and Power Automate, which was formerly called Flow. We're able to use that and actually pull in the value that we want to have displayed instead of the event session, or in our case, we'll be looking at that case closure survey. So whatever you might want to put in there. All right, now what we can also do is we can set up what we call branching rules. So let's say that at the end, we want to go ahead and we want to know, actually, we'll put this in our first section so we don't have to complete the whole survey. So after this one, let's say that because we were at an event and we want to know and share feedback from people, and we want to know if people are on social media, we can ask if somebody is on social media, or basically, are you on Twitter? If they are, we can ask if they will give us their Twitter handle, and then we can maybe interact with them online. So let's go ahead and add in a new choice question. And we'll say, are you on Twitter? And the options are going to be yes and no. And notice that it's actually giving us suggested options. Again, based on the fact that I typed in yes, first of all, it then says, okay, do you want to do a no and a maybe? That's fine. We can use that. We don't need to, but we could go ahead and we could have clicked maybe to add that in there as well. All right, so are you on Twitter? And then underneath that, I'm going to go ahead and add another one. Do this as a text. Please let us know your Twitter handle. All right, now what I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make it hidden. So I'm going to use this visible slider and I'm going to deselect that so that this one will actually be hidden. So if I go ahead and preview this, we can see there it says, are you on Twitter? But the next question is hidden. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a branching rule that will determine if the next question will show or not. So back to the ellipsis, if I go to branching rules, I'm going to create a new rule and I'm just going to call this Twitter rule. We can call it whatever we'd like. I'm going to put in my condition, and my condition is if are you on Twitter is equal to yes. That is our condition, as simple as that. If that's true, what we're going to do is we're going to show the question, please let us know your Twitter handle. If that's false, meaning they've said no, they're not on Twitter, we are going to hide that question. Now, the reason that we want a show condition or show if true and hide if false, if somebody goes ahead and they say yes first of all and then it shows the field and then they change it back to no, it's not necessarily going to re-hide that again. So we want to have a clause for each of those. So now let's go back and let's preview. We say, are you on Twitter? And there we have that question is now displayed to us using that branching rule. Okay, so let's go ahead and do we have any other questions before we move into the next section for survey distribution?
Yes, we do. We actually have quite a few.
Oh, okay.
Starting with Zishan, Megan, can you create a survey with 2 Net Promoter Score questions and create a branching rule if both question scores are more than 8, then open any web page? So it looks like a specific response and then do some sort of action thereafter.
If you just said, could you do that with 1, then yes. Adding in the 2, it would depend where you put them in the survey. So it's a very specific question and it would probably need a bit of sort of like working through. In theory, yes. Typically, you would have 1 Net Promoter Score on a question. So I guess it would, what might, depending on what the purpose is for the different Net Promoter Scores, is you can have 2 different surveys or you could branch those 2 surveys together, if that makes more sense. But in theory, yes, but in terms of how would you do it exactly, it would have to be something that would be looked at.
Hey, Megan, just to add to that, then when you set up the condition, maybe if you can switch to your demo, there is also a possibility for you to set up multiple condition and set up the and or condition. So if the rule is that you want to evaluate both of those NPS, you can then set up the and rule as part of your definition, and then set those 2 condition as a 2 condition in that logic.
So hopefully that gives you something to think about. But it sounds like yes, you would be able to do it. What other questions do we have, Pervin?
Unmute. We have, there's quite a few. Lynn, is conditional logic currently available? For instance, if I indicated that I'm very satisfied, I would be directed to additional questions on that versus if I indicated that I'm dissatisfied.
Yes, absolutely. You could do that. Definitely.
Yep. And let's see, we're answering questions as we speak, so I'm just trying to get the ones that haven't been answered. Those are the only ones that, oh wait, one more. When you change the main font, etc., does it replicate through the survey questions instead of having to change each question font? So change one font on a question and then hopefully it then applies to every.
Well, that might be a question for you. I know if you create a question and you make it required, then it carries on and makes the next question required and so on. So it has some kind of logic to that. But I've never tried it with the fonts. Welly, do you know if it does that?
No, we don't support the action for changing the font. But you can. The workaround is that you can set different questions with different format, and then like show and hide those questions based on the condition, so that it's actually two separate questions with a different format.
Yeah, Willie, just to jump in here, I think what Jules is asking is more about can we have a central place where you can change the font and that will be
yeah,
changed
exactly.
for all the questions.
Yeah. So if I add this question and I say from the start that I want this to use this font, and then I add the next one, that it should use the same font as the last one that I just picked. Otherwise, I have to go through at the minute 16 different questions and change the font on every single one. So I think that was more the desire.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, so unfortunately, right now you need to set up separately, but we are working on an improvement because this is one of the pain points as well. In which in the next release, in the next maybe couple of months, then we are working to centralize the setting for the font so that you just set it at the setting level and it will apply to all questions on the page. Not yet, awesome. It's coming.
Thanks, Welly. All right. Any other questions, or are we able to move on to the next section?
There are one more question. Megan, if we apply branching rules on the first question, then it hides the other one. I'm not sure if that's a full question or not. I'm not exactly sure what he was trying to ask. If we apply branching rule on the first question and then hide it, the other one. Let's follow back up with Zishan thereafter. I guess not sure what he's asking.
Maybe add some more information if there's more to that question. So, but yeah, you wouldn't want to hide the first question because it's not going to then go back up to the first question if you then have something on the second, or it's going to make a poor survey experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's the chicken and the egg scenario.
Exactly. All right, so what we're going to look at next is survey distribution. So if we go back to our Voice of the Customer survey, then again, if you have been using Voice of the Customer, then you will know that in order to send out that survey, you want to go ahead and create a workflow within Dynamics itself. You're going to get the ability to, let's go ahead and just look at this again. Yeah, so we're going to be able to go ahead and send out our survey and also have a direct link to where we could share it if we wanted it and it was anonymous in terms of the responses that we were trying to gather. That's fine. And then what we've also got is on the Forms Pro survey, let's go to our completed one, the case closure survey. We've got a ton of different send options here. So if we click on send, once we're actually ready to go ahead and distribute the survey, we have the ability just to kind of share that non-personalized survey link. So if I took this link and I pasted it into the browser, this is what's known as personalized. So if we see here, we've actually got a variable in here to show the first name of the person. Then we've also got a variable to show the support rep. If I just share that link, then that information isn't going to be populated. I could append to the end of the URL, but to do that every single time a case is closed manually is not really a viable solution. So what we've got is the ability to do other things as well. Now we could share via a QR code, but again, that's going to be non-personalized. So that's going to be perfect for some scenarios. So if you, let's say that you want to have people fill out surveys or essentially complete a form if they're applying for a specific job, you could have a QR code posted up somewhere within your organization. You could also use QR codes internally for people to go ahead and give feedback about their job, about how they're currently feeling about your business. So the QR codes are great if you want to have somebody submit feedback that's going to be non-personalized. In other words, we don't know who that person is necessarily. What we can also do is we can use an embed function. And we can embed a survey in a couple of different ways. We can put it inline. So inline is similar to having it in an iframe where it's actually embedded within a web page itself. We could also have it be a pop-up. So if you think about you're on a website and you've got something that pops up in the middle of it. And we could also have the option to have it as a button, so where it will display on the bottom right corner of a website page, and then we'll be able to open it up and fill out the survey from there. Then what we've got is we've got the ability to just send an email directly. So sending an email directly, this would allow me to go ahead and search for somebody that is either within Office 365, or it would allow me to search and send out to a Dynamics view. So I'm just waiting for it to think and find. There we go. So these are all Dynamics views. So we've got the Contacts Advanced Find view, Associated view, all the different views that I've got. So I can manually just go ahead and type in something, or I could import the recipients via a CSV file and go ahead and upload that and then have it pull those email addresses and send the survey out that way. What we also have the ability to do is go ahead and we can create email templates. And we can use email templates to customize and set up how we want that survey email to look when we go ahead and send that out. Now, with this situation, because we want to go ahead and send out the email when a case is closed, we're going to use Power Automate. So Power Automate, again, this was formerly known as Flow. So apologies if I do say Flow a few times, but this is starting off from Power Automate. Now, what we can do is we can go ahead and we can configure a flow for this specific survey. When we do this, we have the ability to go ahead and pick from a template that already exists, or we could create one from scratch. So if you've already started using Power Automate and you're familiar with it and comfortable with it, you can do that. So then we're going to select to send a survey when a case is resolved. It's going to go ahead and it will show us what our connectors are going to be for Power Automate, and we'll go ahead and create the flow. Now in this scenario, I've already created one. So if I go back here, we can see that there's one flow already configured for this specific survey. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll just look at that. And we can see there how many times it's run, if it's failed, and then the status is being on. And if I go ahead just to click to edit that, and we can see what this does. This is not a demo about Power Automate, so if you aren't familiar with it, I do apologize, but this is essentially saying when a record is updated, we'll check to see if that case has been resolved. We'll check if the customer is an account. If they are, we'll get the account information and then send the survey. If not, they're a contact, so we're going to go ahead and send that information. Now here's where, if you think about when you create your workflow in Dynamics, is essentially what we're doing here is we are pulling in information that is related to the case, and we're going to use that to populate information. So we can see here that we've picked which survey it is, because we started from the survey, and then we've got the email template that we want to use. This is going to be set regarding the case, or the incident is the name of the entity. The recipient is the contact, and then we pull in their first name and the last name. I'm pulling in the support rep so I can get the owner of the case, And then what I'm doing is I'm pulling in the case number and the case title from the case as well. So what then happens is if we go ahead and we close the case, we are then going to get an email that's going to be sent. Now, what I've got is I've got a couple of emails. So I've got one, this is the email that comes back when we close the case, and it's the voice of the customer survey. So that should look familiar. We can basically pull in information and then we can click to provide the feedback, and we'll see that we've got a customized survey. Hi, Jane, and the support rep was Megan Walker. We've got the same thing if we go to our email for the Forms Pro survey and we have our email template, and we can see hi Jane and then the case, and then we can click to take the survey, and again we get that same customization, and we can see hi Jane and we can see the support rep of Megan Walker. So I'm just going to quickly fill this out with some information just so that we can see something through when we look at the responses. And let's go ahead and we will submit that. All right, so now we're going to move on to survey responses. I don't want to miss any of this, and I'm conscious that if there's a lot more questions, we might do that. So let's carry on. We'll go through survey responses and then the survey analytics, and then we can respond to any questions. So keep typing in any questions and we will get to as many as we can. So let's go ahead and let's look at how the responses work. So again, within Voice of the Customer, oh, hang on. Too many windows open. There we go. So within Voice of the Customer, if we go to the survey responses, we will see that the responses come through. And when we get our responses through, we can see that it's linked to Jane Doe, who's the respondent. Her contact record link is here, and the link to the case is here. So we can see all of the information and we can see all of the feedback. Now, if we go into Forms Pro and we go back, we can see that we were setting up our survey here, and we've got the questions tab, and we've also got a responses tab. So our questions and our responses are all within the same area. So we can see that we've sent out 15 invitations. We've got 24 different responses. We can see we've got a pretty bad net promoter score of -8, and the overall sentiment is negative, which is not good. So we can see that we've got the feedback immediately there in terms of the number of responses and a little bit of an analysis there. If I go ahead and I click on invitations, we can see here that we've got a ton of different invitations. We can see there, not that I was testing or setting things up, but we can see there that we've got a status for each of them. So this person has responded. We've got some that have started, meaning they've clicked on the link, but they haven't completed it. We can see that these invitations actually failed. They didn't make it to the person for various reasons. We can also see there that we've got the responses, and we can see those listed as well, and we can see whether it was a net promoter score of a promoter, passive, or a detractor. If I go into Dynamics, again, remembering that this was, everything is stored in the common data service, so everything's in, essentially we can pull it into our same app if you're assuming you're already moved to the unified interface. So we've got this model-driven Power App. So here I can see that we've got our survey is pulled through, so I can see information about the survey. I can see all of my responses as well. So if I look here, we can see there's the survey response that we just received. So we can see the net promoter score, the overall sentiment. I can see the regarding of the case. I can see the link to the contact. So we're seeing that same sort of information. And then I can see all of the feedback that was submitted as well. So I can see all that information. Now, the voice of the customer, sorry, the Forms Pro invitation that is sent and the response that is received, they are both activities. So if you think about in Dynamics, you've got phone calls, tasks, emails, all of those different activity types. These are both activity types as well, which is why we can have that regarding and that link through to the case, or a link to an account, or a link to a contact, and so on. All right, now the last thing that I want to show is the survey analytics. So if you think about with Voice of the Customer, unless you're using Power BI or you created an SSRS report, then there aren't really any analytics in terms of being able to gather all of the responses together and view everything. What we've got in Forms Pro is if I go back to the survey, and if I look back on the responses tab, we can see there are overall analytics. We've also got some latest insights. So we can see 38% of responders have expressed negative sentiment. We can also see any association insights. So we can see here that those who answered passive in question 4, 100% of them responded high in question 1. So we can gather some feedback. We can also get some Power BI reports directly within Forms Pro. So here we can see the different questions that were asked, and we can see the feedback that was given. So what I can also do is if I right click here, let's show this as a table. So I can now see, there's my chart, there's all of my information with people that agreed with these statements, disagreed, neutral, strongly agree, strongly disagree. We can see all of that information. What we've also got is Microsoft have created in app and launched in App Source. If we go to Microsoft App Source, for Power BI, we can actually download for Power BI and install this app, so we can see our Forms Pro customer satisfaction data. We can access this and view our responses. So if I just open up a couple more, there we go. So we're able to then look at the information by agent or by support rep, whatever term you might use it within your organization. What you can also then do, because you've got that data in the Common Data Service, we could then create different Power Apps of our own. So we can see here that we've got a Forms Pro survey overview. We can see how many surveys we've got, how many invites, responses, the average Net Promoter Score, and the invite responses, and then the last response when that was. Then we can look at the different surveys, and we can look at the questions for that survey and all the information about that specific one. And then something a little more fun that I did for a demo. Here we can see the data is being used, and this data is actually being used to combine the results from a couple of different surveys all into one specific Power App report, where we can see the overall Net Promoter Score, the number of contacts by superhero for this specific demo, Net Promoter Score by type, we can see a word cloud, and so on. So once we've got all that information, because it's all stored in the Common Data Service, we can then really use that data and make some extremely powerful reports and really analyze how our business and how our organization is doing based on the customer feedback, and also based on employee feedback as well. All right, so let's see if we have any questions.
We do. There's several in here that we're somewhat going through. Looks like Welly has taken this one. When will an enterprise-ready version of Forms Pro be available for use so the templates can be created, saved, migrated from one environment to another? I think that last one is where the hitch is. So Welly wants to take that one. At least, Welly, can we migrate Forms Pro surveys from one environment to another?
Yes, so you can go to the survey, and then Megan,
Yep,
do you have?
I'm on it. I'm
Yeah.
getting there.
All right, Megan probably can show you.
Yep. There we go. So if we're on a survey, we've got a little ellipsis here with a couple of actions. So I can copy it, and then I can say, well, where do I want to copy it? If I copy it, it just takes the same and creates a new version of it within this same environment. Otherwise, I can copy to. And then what we can see here is all of the different environments that I have access to. So if you think about, look at the top two, we've got a production environment and a sandbox environment, which for some of you, that might be what you're used to. You could have a ton of different environments, but I can pick and say, all right, well, let's take this and then let's move it and copy to my sandbox environment. And we can see there it's been successfully copied over to sandbox. Okay, hopefully that helps.
Looks like Welly's already answered the other one. If we are not yet on UCI, where can we view the survey responses in Classic Interface? And Willie responded, the survey invite and response should appear on the activity timeline in the web client.
Yep. So let's show you. So I have what we would call the classic interface, because that's what Voice of the Customer works on. If I go to Forms Pro, you can still see, but you would still have to add it to a model-driven Power App. So you can still see the responses and see the information. If you're not already moved to the unified interface, that's another thing really to start looking at, because that is kind of imminent as well. If I go to Jane Doe and look at her record, then like Willie was saying, the timeline, so we can see here the timeline there. We've got our case closure feedback request. So we've got the survey invite, and then we've also got the survey response. So you'd see that there. You would also see it on the account that's related, and you'd also see it if you had set the survey invitation and response to something else, like we did with the case. We'd also see it on the case record too. So hopefully that helps.
I think that covers all the questions that we have open. So are there any other questions that we haven't fielded from the audience? Anyone? Got about 9 minutes left.
So type quick. So a couple of other things just to mention, like I said, in terms of being able to cover absolutely everything, there just isn't time in an hour slot for a webinar. So definitely go ahead and check out the Microsoft documentation. There's also within that documentation, there's always a what's new, so what the latest features are. And from my perspective, one of the things that I've been really impressed with Welly and the entire Forms Pro team is that pretty much every month there's been new functionality that has been released, and that is really valuable functionality that's been added to Forms Pro all the time. So it's definitely a good idea to kind of keep an eye on that and see what's going on and see what's been added, because it's really fantastic how quickly new things have been added to Forms Pro. Welly, is there anything else from you that you can think of?
So I think that I shared also my email. If there's some questions that we have not answered, you can reach out to Megan. You can also reach out to us. If there are some questions, I know that Zihan, for example, have some questions. Zihan, probably is good for us to follow up after the call. Feel free to reach out to me. We can either set up a follow-up meeting so that we can discuss your case in detail to see if there is a bug. If this is in fact a bug, then we'll be happy to fix it for you.
There are two more questions that are just came in. The follow-up to the enterprise question was, can the copy be saved as a file and stored? No. Scenario of wanting to share a file that not everyone would have access to copy. At least that's the scenario behind that. And then the other question was, can a survey response be hidden from the case timeline?
No, the time. So if anyone is ever, if anyone is a system administrator, as anyone's ever like customized Dynamics, you'll know that the timeline is an area that you cannot make changes to. So you wouldn't be able to say, right, I want to hide this specifically. If you didn't want specific people to be able to see it, then you could potentially change security roles, but ultimately it's going to go on the timeline. So, and in terms of the access to copy and download as a file, like Pervin said, you can't download it as a file. One thing that I have seen from organizations, and I see this also when people are using Power Automate and Power Apps, and to me it's good practice, is that you have a like a system user that has a license, and that when you're creating your forms and then you're creating your Power Automate, your flows in Power Automate, and any Power Apps, the model-driven Power Apps you might be creating, is that you do that on the system user, so that is the user account that's the one that's associated with those different forms and the different flows. It's good practice in terms of then if somebody leaves an organization, is you don't have to then worry about transferring things. So using a system user is might be a good idea to think about.
Okay, well, I guess we're at time, or at least a couple more minutes. There are still a couple more questions that have come in. But I think we've touched upon most of these. Just going to make sure. Yep, we've touched upon all of these. So for those of you who really love this webinar, we will certainly post this up on the YouTube channels that we have at Microsoft, so Dynamics 365, also on the Power Platform YouTube channel. So you have the ability to go back and watch this whenever you want to. It should take about 7 working days for it to show up. So with that said, if there are no more questions, thank you so much, Megan and Welly and the rest of his team for jumping in and answering questions. If you have questions after the fact, please do let us know, and we will certainly try to answer as many questions thereafter. Welly, do you have any closing items that you want to put in?
Nope, I just want to thank you again, Megan. You've been a fantastic MVP that provide the expertise, the how-tos and tips and tricks to the community. So I think that Megan's website has tons of excellent articles. So I highly recommend you to check out Megan's site as well if you have any questions.
You're very welcome. Thanks for asking me. And again, it's definitely time to be looking at this now. You do not want to be figuring stuff out the week before Voice of the Customer is going to go away and stop working. So definitely, if you haven't already, start planning this out, start thinking about it. Yeah, it'll be a good transition.
All right, with that said, we'll go ahead and put a stamp on this. So thank you so much, and we will talk again next time. Thank you, everyone.